Hey, it's Yonko. Today I'd like to talk about a person who gained their fame in the Second World War and went on to get it bruised during the Korean War. That would be one General Douglas MacArthur, American general and all-around megalomaniac. Now, I personally know that history is not black and white. It can't be because people aren't black and white. But, even looking back in shades of gray, it's hard to see MacArthur in a positive light. And today I'd like to see if I can't convince a few more people into my way of thinking. Now, I'm not going to go over every single thing that MacArthur has done that made me dislike him. That would make this video way longer than it needs to be. For today, I'm going to focus on how MacArthur fumbled the defense of the Philippines, his sketchy dealings with President Quezon, and his sham Medal of Honor while denying it to someone that actually stayed and fought. Now, you cannot lay all the blame on MacArthur for how badly the defense of the Philippines went, but we're going to see just how much we can. The US had existing plans on what to do in case of war with Japan. That was War Plan Orange. War Plan Orange had a bunch of different variations over the years, but the plan always assumed that the US was going to need to take back their island holdings and then methodically recapture until they hit the Philippines again. What this meant was, though, the Philippines were going to need to hold out on their own and wait to be relieved by the Navy. Usually, War Plan Orange 3, which was the variant that was under MacArthur, was meant to hold Manila Bay, and retreat to the Bataan Peninsula and Corregidor if they weren't able to hold Manila and Manila Bay. MacArthur, in his wisdom, decided that the plan looked defeatist, and that he was going to beat the Japanese at the beachheads with his Filipino army that he had trained personally. So, he took the poorly trained, led, and armed Filipino army and put them up against veteran Japanese troops to try and fight them at the beachheads, with results that you can probably predict. This isn't a dig at the Filipino soldiers either. Those guys were doing the best with what they had. But instead of understanding his troops, and understanding that they weren't going to be able to hold a better supplied and armed veteran enemy, MacArthur had them try and defend at the beachheads that even the Army and the Navy knew in 1930 when they made the plan wasn't going to happen. They knew you can't hold a giant island when a superior enemy is surrounding it. So, MacArthur, panicking after not being able to hold the beachheads, reverted to the old plan immediately. But the thing is, that plan had set up supply dumps in Corregidor and Bataan. Food, water, medicine, ammunition, all the things you need to fight. But because he had decided he was going to defend at the beachheads, all those supplies weren't on Bataan and Corregidor anymore. They were in scattered supply dumps. And while the army was retreating, they were going to have to try and take as many supplies as they could to Bataan and Corregidor. All while the Japanese were hot on their heels. The combined US and Filipino forces would make it to Bataan and Corregidor. They would hold out, but they would do it undersupplied, all because of MacArthur's attitude about the defeatist plan, War Plan Orange 3. Now, MacArthur would regularly have his press personnel make broadcasts from Corregidor giving updates about the battle. This is another aspect that shows the megalomania of the man, because he would insert himself into every communique. Every action the troops made was by his discretion. There were never individual soldiers named, instead it was MacArthur's men. The man used the press effectively and forged an image for himself to the American people who were desperate for good news. But he did it while always remaining in the bunker on Corregidor. That's why the soldiers on Bataan gave him a new nickname, Dugout Doug, which you can imagine drove him up a wall. That would lead to the first of MacArthur's publicity visits to the front, showing how brave he was for the photo op, standing during gunfire and artillery, and then packing it up afterwards and going back to Corregidor. It's a little aside, but that also bothers me. Now again, like I said before, there was no way for us to win in the Philippines or to successfully hold out in the Philippines, but MacArthur damn sure did make it as miserable as possible. Now, after all his work with the press during his time on Corregidor, MacArthur made himself into a household name, especially in the US. who in 1942 were desperate for some good news. And MacArthur made himself into a hero, fighting valiantly against the Japanese against all odds. But this also meant that when the writing was on the wall for the people on Bataan and Corregidor, MacArthur was not going to be allowed to stay on the island. That'd be too great a loss of morale at home for him to lose, surrender, or die. Now, it's completely understandable to me. I can't blame him, and I can't blame command for taking him off the island. It sucks for the soldiers and the generals that had to stay, but I see the logic in it. But what bothers me is the general that was left in charge, General Wainwright on Corregidor and General King on Bataan. On April 9th, 1942, General King was forced to surrender. His soldiers were exhausted, starving, and diseased, and physically could not fight anymore. A month later, General Wainwright would have to follow, and he would surrender Corregidor. Both of those men suffered with their men, and they would go on to suffer through the Bataan Death March and then brutal years in Japanese prison of war camps. MacArthur, on the other hand, managed to PR himself into a Medal of Honor for a command that he left, and if that wasn't galling enough on its own, when the idea of giving General Wainwright the Medal of Honor for his actions on Corregidor was floated, MacArthur himself said that he wouldn't endorse it since he surrendered. The fucking balls to get an award for doing the same thing, then saying no to a general that was actually a fighting general on the ground is insane. Before this gets too much off the rails, I'll hit my last piece of MacArthur hate for the day. And that's going to be his sketchy dealings with the president of the Philippines, Quezon. This is a little bit minor, it's kind of nitpicky, it's a little gossipy, but it still bothers me. MacArthur was deeply tied to the Philippines pre-war, and he had been one of the people that helped create the Filipino Army when the U.S. was getting ready to give the Philippines its independence. It's also where he gets the iconic hat that he made sure to wear everywhere instead of wearing a regulation U.S. general's cap, because he wanted to be an actor more than a general. Either way, come January of 1942, things aren't looking so hot, and the president of the Philippines and his cabinet are shacking up with MacArthur on Corregidor. They decided that both MacArthur and his staff deserved a little more than just a pat on the back, and they made an executive order to give them a monetary reward. For MacArthur, this came out to $500,000, which, adjusted for today's money, roughly $9 million. This is all kept very hush-hush, since how incredibly sketchy it looked. And when Quezon attempted to gift General Dwight Eisenhower $60,000 for his work while stationed in the Philippines, Eisenhower had enough sense to see how incredibly fucking bad of a look it was. But old Doug made sure to take the money, and he never said another word about it. Not in a memoir, not in a letter, nothing after the war. The only reason it's known about now is a historian named Carol Batillo found a record of the executive order granting the money in 1979. I'll conclude my rant here. Some of it might seem unreasonable, and it might be impacted by the continued crock of shit that MacArthur got up to for the rest of the war. But I hope you learned something, and maybe you might be interested in joining the growing MacArthur Hater Club. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a like. If you have some questions you want answered, or if you desperately want to defend something you think I got wrong, or if you're interested in more of my misgivings on MacArthur, let me know. I've got 4 more years worth of World War II to critique him on. I've been Yako. Goodbye.